economist and entrepreneur, and he's also author of Benefit Cooperation for Africa Initiative, and he's going to share us the suspension of HR 6600 of the U.S. Congress draft bill. Mr. Babu, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Let the ball get rolling. Before directly going to our discussion point and talking point, I would like you to tell us a bit about this book, Benefit Cooperation for Africa Initiative.
Thank you. Basically, the Benefit Cooperation for Africa Initiative is a new international trade geared towards development, conceived and developed here in the US to provide cooperative and collective producers in Africa a direct access to the US market, address investment access to the US market, so they can have a better shot. As you know, or in my study for the last 15 years, and activism and study for the last 15 years, I was offended initially by the fact that the international commodity market that governs the trade of the global trade, literally makes it very, very, very hard for Africans to get a better share of the money made from the products. And in this case, coffee is a very good example. Our farmers in Ethiopia work, most of them work, they do 90% of the input in the production, but what they get from the end consumer on this side, if they're not organized, they only get 1% of the money we pay. I pay here in the US by going to my local coffee shop. For a 90% input, they only get 1% of the money I pay. And if they're organized, like the many cooperative, the 8 cooperative unions, including the Oromia Coffee Farmers Cooperative Union, the largest in Africa, there are over 500,000 small coffee farmers who have organized themselves as a co-op and the union, and they compete in the global market. They bring high-valued coffee to the market here, but they only get 10% of the money for a 90% input. That kind of offended me because I am an African. I am the son and the daughter of the farmer. And I live here, I pay tax, and I take my hard-earned money to a store to buy. And my purchasing habits, I don't want my purchasing habit to put hard-working farmers in poverty. So I was offended by that. So we created a new alternative value chain, or a sensanet, to connect, to provide them small coffee farmers investment access. So we called it Benefit Cooperation. Benefit Cooperation is a hybrid of for-profit and non-profit. It makes money, it's business, it's accountable, but it provides the small person in the value chain equal access to the competition. So the model gives 500,000 small coffee farmers in Ethiopia organized under the cooperative union a $10 per farmer investment opportunity, so they can raise the money and own 50% of the roasting facility we'll build in here. Imagine 500,000, $10 per farmer, that's $5 million. And I'm going to raise another $5 million from my friends and family and neighbors and American friends, and match up that fund and give the farmers a 50% profit sharing. That will increase their take from what it is now, 10% to 35, 40%. So we'll address the most pressing challenge we face economically and socially if we can give the African collective producers an investment access in partnership with the diaspora. So the model is introduced. It's a new model. It's beyond fair trade. We call it virtuous exchange. It leverages the power of business to address the most pressing challenge we Africans face, not only in the continent, here in the US as well. So in a nutshell, that's what the Benefit Cooperation for Africa Initiative is, and coffee is the first prototype. And we're going to put a light to this noble idea so the other African members of the US African diaspora can emulate and duplicate this model with other community producers in Africa. So that's what we've been working on for the last 15 years.
Good job. Let's get back to the drawing board. And our talking point is going to revolve around the suspension of HR 6600 draft bill of the US Congress. On February 4, 2022, the US Congress issued HR 6600 draft bill. The article of the allegation was drafted to support stabilization, peace, and democracy efforts in Ethiopia. So, would this sanction allegation bring the aforementioned stabilization, peace, and democracy to Ethiopia? What's your take on?
Oh, as a matter of fact, it does the contrary. It's a very ill-conceived bill. It's a politically driven, motivated. Even for America, it's against the interest of America. Again, it's the interest of the American foreign policy, which is peace, development, commerce in the US as well as globally. So this bill, first and foremost, it was pushed through literally illegally by political will of two individuals for that matter. And it's highly motivated by the members of Congress, two high-profile members. One is the chair of the Foreign Relation Committee on the House side, Congressman Meeks, and the other one is the chair of the US Foreign Relation on the Senate side. It was pushed by two powerful members of Congress. I don't understand how on earth they would think of implementing such a vicious, cruel, uncalled for, ill-conceived, fast-tracked, undemocratically, and out of nowhere it just popped out. So not only it does not promote peace, on the contrary, it will destabilize the region, the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia is a 110 million people country very strategic in the Horn as well as the Middle East. And destabilizing Ethiopian economy has literally a serious consequence on the regional security. So I still don't understand how they even thought about such a wicked, ill-conceived bill. So it was very dangerous. I'm glad it stopped on its track.
Okay, will you give us your illustration on your insight? You've said it is more of political will than the reality. And again, it's a very draconian in nature.
Yes.
What do you mean? What do you mean by it?
Okay, when in the American political system, there are three parts of equal part of government. One is Congress, the other one is the executive, Biden, the president, and the executive aspect. So they have the executive and the legislation, which is Congress, and then the judiciary. The first two are the ones who initiate laws. And law is made by the US Congress, but it can be initiated from the Congress or it can be influenced by the administration or the president's office. And so they have different motives. The politicians are politicians, and they might be lobbied for that matter. An interest group can come and say, we want you to pass this, and they can transact. We can do this for you if you push this. That's where the work of a lobbying component comes to play. But last year in November, even within the administration, there are professionals and there are politically appointed personnel. In the Biden administration last year, there was a debate within the professionals and the politically appointed government officials. The politically appointed government officials, about 7, 8 of them, including Susan Rice, Gail Smith, Herman Cohen. These are people who had long-term relationship with the previous government, and the previous government has a lobbying arm, has finance on this side, and they do an amazing job mobilizing the political process in their favor. And so the standard President Biden had last year was highly influenced by these political players who had some deep-rooted relationship or bias in favor of the previous government, the TPLF government. And then Within the administration, there are the professional ones. In the National Security Council, it's an intelligence, a big intelligent machinery that collects data, all kind of information, data from human and satellite and name it, everything about the world, all the factors. They gather the information, they analyze the information, and they take a reading. The National Cooperative Council decided the engagement, America's engagement, has to be based on the fact and considered Ethiopia an ally in the region, and anything that we do, any strategy America takes, has to be a constructive engagement. So even within the Biden administration, the politicians were motivated by their relationship, their bias, and they were trying to sanction Ethiopia, and the professionals within the administration looked at the fact and they said, no, this is the wrong course to take. In fact, that's why President Biden took changed the course and called Prime Minister Abiy to restructure the American-Ethiopia foreign relations. So it is within this context, as the Biden government was walking away from its previous strong sanction-based approach. Here comes out of nowhere the US Congress that has its own power, can initiate laws and legislation. And by the influence of two prominent personalities, this bill was introduced, ushered quickly, usually in the process for like in the foreign relation, both on the House and the Senate side, there is a committee and there is a subcommittee focused on different regions. They have one subcommittee for Africa on the House side, one subcommittee for Africa on the Senate side. And any issue dealing with US foreign relations has to be first discussed in the subcommittee. There has to be hearings and there have to be debate. They have to look at all sides and make a decision to take it to the main foreign committee. That didn't happen. They quickly hijacked the process without any hearing, without any democratic process. They fast-tracked it, and before we knew it, it was up ready for the House committee. So it was illegally pushed, undemocratically pushed, and then now it is in direct contradiction to the track that the Biden administration is taking, which is very constructive. So here is the contradiction of the American, lawmaking in the American context, in the American political process. There are a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of fight, there's a lot of debate. And so what we're seeing right now is a disconnect between the Congress and the Biden government, and disconnect in the Biden government between the State Department and the National Security Council. And I'm glad the president has taken the wise advice taken by the National Security Advisor to really take a very engaged, constructive engagement with Ethiopia. So that's what we're seeing.
All right. According to the articles of the bill, among others, the U.S. policy would work to support to end the civil war and gross violation of human rights, such as crime against humanity and genocide. Which civil war does their policy referring to? Because the conflict in the northern part of Ethiopia was a conventional war between the federal government and the TPLF. It wasn't a war or a conflict between certain ethnic with another one. So which civil war are they referring to?
To be honest with you, I don't even recognize the detail. I mean, I've read it, I've seen it. It is just a vicious, one-sided action to really put obstacle on the growth and development of Ethiopia. It doesn't have any merit. It doesn't have any logic. So I don't even allow any discussion, because allowing the discussion and the content is accepting the bill by itself. So I stop. I'm in my conversation about this bill to my members of Congress, my senators and congressmen, and a few friends on the Hill, is to attack it as a whole. It's illegal. The process is illegal. It is uncalled for. It's based on bias. It doesn't have any merit, and it infringes on Ethiopian foreign sovereignty in so many ways. This is just one sick bill. So I reject it as a whole. I don't even allow a conversation. Look, it doesn't have any merit. It doesn't have any logic. So it's absurd to open a discussion on the merit of the bill when we know it's one-sided, when we know it's not fair, when we know it is overbearing, when we know it is undemocratic. In fact, it has a neo-colonizer stone to it. So as an activist, I fight it right there. And so it doesn't have any merit. Literally, I mean, I wonder who influenced the two senators. Literally, two powerful people. It doesn't merit on the fact that it doesn't reconcile with the reality on the ground. That's why the National Security Council stood against it last year when the Biden administration was pushing a strong sanction.
Great. Whatsoever it is, the Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives of the U.S. suspended the imposition of the bill last week. What does this imply?
Oh, it implies a lot of things. Two things. First and foremost, it shows a disconnect between the Biden administration and Congress. Biden administration has changed the course. They're taking a very constructive engagement with Ethiopia that has to be supported, encouraged, and they're standing strong, and they're telling Congress to step out, literally, because this is interference on how the Biden government is doing its job. To begin with, at the end of the day, the President Biden has to sign on the bill to make it law. So even Congress passes the law, at the end, the president has the privilege to veto it out or write it. So there's no point in Congress pursuing any conversation about this bill if President Biden doesn't support it. So that's the good news for us. So we have to thank the Biden government for taking actions. And the second element is we have the Ethiopian diaspora and other friends of Ethiopians have waged a very strong opposition on this bill to the US Congress. The diaspora organizations and personalities, and individually and collectively, we've really pushed back. I myself, as an individual, have written an open letter to two of my senators and my congressman, open letter making it public, really strongly opposing, denouncing the process and pushing back the arrogance of this bill, and at the end of the day, arguing. I'm an American as well as I'm an Ethiopian. So what America does by way of foreign policy in that region matters to me. And so we've made a very strong case saying this bill is against the core value of the US foreign policy. As I said earlier, peace, democracy, commerce, and economic development here and in Africa. And as far as I'm concerned, this bill stands against that. And when Ethiopia is finally trying to survive the many obstacles she has faced for the last 30 years, we all know life has been difficult with the previous government. And then the last 3, the country is pulling herself together. We had COVID, and then the conflict, and now the global crisis because of the Ukraine war. Ethiopia is trying to finally, collect her energies. The people of Ethiopia, I was just in Ethiopia for 3 months. I've seen them daily from young to old, trying to better their lives, working hard to make ends meet, and they're working hard. And imagining such an assumption at this junction in the Ethiopian history is literally declaring war. And I've opposed it on a humanitarian ground. I've opposed it as an American. I've opposed it as an Ethiopian. I've opposed it as an African. And like me, many diaspora activists, as well as diaspora organizations, have done an amazing job voicing their concern about this bill to the US Congress. It's also a result of that as well. So I feel good, it has stopped. Now we have to continue the fight to make sure that it is completely dead and buried.
Of course, you've highlighted it early on, but I need you to reflect on this again. Among others, the allegations reads again, the bill was drafted to use all diplomatic developments and legal tools to stabilize Ethiopia. After all, the allegation was to pass sanction. Is sanction a diplomatic way of solving instability? I need you only to talk on how the certain sanction cope up with a diplomatic mission and diplomatic activity of a certain nation to solve a certain problem. Does this sanction has anything to do with diplomatic activities? From the very definition of diplomacy, diplomacy is all about mutual benefits and bilateral relation, which is very smooth and peaceful without hurting anyone. It ought to be win-win for both sides, either ways.
Yes, ideally, that was supposed to be the case. But there are outside the around the political process, there are interest groups who are mobilized and organized and financed to influence decision making. And these are, some of them are action-oriented, they call them political action committees, who mobilize public support for issue or a candidate. And there are lobby firms who are available for hire to push an agenda in the political process. So for the right money, you can buy the influence of a lobbying firm. Usually the lobby firms are, like if a member of Congress leaves Congress after serving the US Congress for 10, 15 years, and what they do is they go create a lobbying firm. So you can hire them and they can call their friends on the Hill trying to influence their decision making. So this is outside the ideal diplomatic relationship between two countries, which is supposed to be a relationship for mutual benefit. It hijacks that process, and pushes an agenda for the highest bidder. So here is how outside influence, money, lobbying matters, or how lobbying and finance can hijack the political process and come up with a legislation that's contradictory to the basic ideal diplomatic relationship to have a policy crafted out of that between two countries.
Appreciate it again. As the saying goes, by hook or crooks, the US government is blindly meddling in Ethiopia's internal affairs, and Ethiopians in diaspora even here demonstrated, denounced the involvement and meddling of US in Ethiopia's sovereign affairs. Even the government tried a lot in handling its own problems with Ethiopian Africans solution. But at the end of the day, the US government came up with very draconian allegation. How do you see this all, and why the US government so obsessed to involve and take action in Ethiopian sovereign affairs these days? Are they looking for a regime change, or are they going to undertake so-called regime castration, as so many political analysts name it? What is your take on it?
First, we have to be very careful when we say American government. There is no one American government, as I was trying to say in my earlier comment. The power in America is divided on so many parts. On a very basic level, there is three equal equal parts to the government. Like I said, President Biden, Congress, and the judiciary. They're supposed to have equal powers and negotiate to pass legislation on or craft foreign policy. Okay. So between this, at the very, in fact, take the judiciary out, the Congress and Biden, there's two parts to it. And then there are lobby firms outside the halls of Congress. There are interest groups financed by many other people who have different political agendas. So they have an influence as well. So when we talk about American policy towards Ethiopia, we have to be careful who in the American political process is doing this. We have to break it down, otherwise we'll be misled. And then there's the American foreign policy philosophy in place, and this is supposedly a democratic country in the world and wants to promote peace and democracy and commerce all over the world. They mean it. I mean, this is true values, but whether that is implemented is another issue. So if we break it down, now we'll be able to really see where this thing is coming. Initially, the sanction was initiated by the Biden government. That was because within the Biden government, there were officials who had a very strong relationship with the previous Ethiopian government from day one. They have a long-time relationship, a long-time allied interest. For instance, the lady by the name of Gail Smith, who is currently at the State Department in charge of the global COVID vaccine dissemination, she was a reporter 30 years ago, supposedly, and reporting on the war in Ethiopia, and she was in the field with TPLF founders. She was filing a story right from the field in support of their movement. And at one moment during Obama administration, she was the national security advisor for Obama. So this is a lady who has really 30% of 30 years of her life invested in the last government, the TPLF government. Herman Cohen is a person who was Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. He's the one who negotiated the deal when Mengistu left. So about 7 of them, Susan Rice, they have worked they have a strong attachment and relationship with the previous government. So it is them who initiated, who advised Biden to take that sanction that was imposed, they were trying to impose in November. Since then, as I said earlier, within the administration itself, the professionals who handled the information, analyze the information, collect the information, it was their decision, it was their assessment. The course Biden government took against Ethiopia was the wrong one. And America doesn't need to put sanction on Ethiopia, but engage in Ethiopia in a constructive engagement. So even with the Biden administration, there was division about this issue. Currently, ever since President Biden called Prime Minister Abiy, his administration is taking a different course. And now, out of nowhere, Congress on its own came up with this law. So there is no one American thing. The American political process is very contentious and very competitive, and different political groups come into play. So that is a reflection of how American government works, not necessarily the American position on Ethiopia. America's position in Ethiopia, as far as American foreign policy is concerned, is in line with the Ethiopian interest. That's why the Biden administration took the advice of the National Security Council, because the National Security Council concluded Ethiopia's interest, American interest, has to be mutually, like he said, for the benefit of both. So when we talk about America, we have to be very careful not to bundle America as one, not to create a perception that America is against Ethiopia. No, the political process. In fact, to be honest with you, last year, what America did is, to me, was a direct reflection of the absence of activism from the Ethiopian government and the diplomatic scene, and the absence of active diaspora engagement in the political landscape. And then the dynamic finance focused, laser focused campaign the supporters of the previous government conducted. They have a law firm, they have a lobby firm, they have a media firm, they had relationship, they were able to influence the American foreign policy. We are 1 million strong. We're 1 million voters. We pay tax. We have a voice. We can shape, we can influence American foreign policy towards Ethiopia. Right. So to answer your question, there's nothing like one America. It's how the process works. And moving forward, we have to get engaged and do more to make sure that American foreign policy is in line with Ethiopian foreign interests, because at the end of the day, peace, commerce, democracy is what we both want.
Okay. Let me ask you this. How do you rate the caliber of Ethiopian government in resisting the U.S. involvement since the get-go? It's not only about the conflict in Tigray. The U.S. government used to meddle in Ethiopian sovereign affairs regarding the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, right? Egypt and Sudan brought the case to the U.S. government, and the U.S. government and the World Bank used to take part as a mediator, as observer. Later on, they put themselves in the issue and blindly bargained on that political contention between Egypt and Sudan. Later on, they have been complaining about the establishment and embarking of Prosperity Party. Again, they were also very furious and resisting about this national election, which was undergone last year. In the meantime, they were very active and keenly involving in the conflict between the Ethiopian government and the TPLF in the north. It's a very full-fledged conspiracy. It's not only the war, civil war, this conflict. The U.S. government has a very hidden agenda, and you are very familiar with it because you do this economic and political analysis there. How do you rate the resistance, the systematic resistance of the Ethiopian government in handling all this draconian move of the U.S. government?
There's two parts to it. First, let me talk about the Ethiopian government reaction once the Biden government tried to impose sanction. The Ethiopian government has to be moved by the interest of Ethiopia and the people of Ethiopia, and anything that is not to the benefit of Ethiopia, whether it is GERD or the sanction, the Ethiopian government has the duty to stand strong. And I admire and I appreciate the courage the administration had in pushing back on principles, both on the GERD as well as the sanction as a result of the conflict. So that's admirable. At the end of the day, the world has, the government has shown to the world that the Ethiopian people can come together and stand firm, no matter what the consequences. That's admirable. And I would rate that in a higher maybe in 80 or 90% of, I'll give it 9 out of 10. But prior to the sanction, during the Trump administration's first attempt to influence American foreign policy in support of the Egyptians, during that time, the Ethiopian diplomatic movement was almost none whatsoever. It was, like emergency crisis management. There's no clear. I can't see any very clearly articulated foreign policy. I don't see capacity of diplomats to really make that work. And I've been, I've gone to the Ethiopian embassy for the last, 20 years almost because of the project that I have. And the activity, the diplomatic activity from the Ethiopian embassy was very weak, especially during the previous government. Most of the diplomats were political appointees. They don't have the capacity and the skill to manage to execute a foreign policy. And the Ethiopian government didn't have any foreign policy as such, clearly defined.
Due to the interest of time, I would like to wrap up my discussion with Tababu Asafa, author of Benefit Cooperation for Africa Initiative. And also he is an entrepreneur and consultant. Thank you for making time with us to share this insight and reflection on the suspension of HR 6600 draft bill of the US Congress.
Thank you very much. Thank you for OBN for the opportunity. Ethiopia will prevail.
Thank you. Dear viewers, thank you for being with us. This brings you to the end of our edition. For today, see you next time with another edition. Bye-bye. Take care.